J. Edwin Orr was a Baptist preacher in America who was one of the greatest voices of revival in the 20th century. Not only did he become a leading expert on the history of revival, he also was used of God to bring revival all around the world. The first book he published in 1934 was titled, Can God? And it tells the story of how his amazing ministry began. James Edwin Orr was born in Belfast, Ireland on January 15, 1912. His mother led him to Christ when he was 9 years old. He was a good, church-going, hard-working young man. But as he was approaching 20 years old, James realized that nothing in his life distinguished him as a Christian. His friends and coworkers didn't even know that he was a Christian. That's when he determined that his life was going to make a difference for Christ. After work one night, James found a Christian friend of his and challenged him to join him in going to the streets of Belfast to preach. Neither of them had ever preached at all, but they sang to the music of a ukulele to draw a crowd. And once the crowd had assembled, they preached the gospel to them. They were unskilled and inexperienced, but they did the best they knew how, and they went back and preached on the streets again and again. One night in May of 1932, they were walking home from preaching one of their meetings, rejoicing in what a blessing it was to serve the Lord, and discussing the power of God to answer prayer. Before they got home, they had agreed to pray together for God to give them a band of 24 young men who were yielded to God and eager to work for a spiritual awakening. They created a notebook to write down the names of young men they would pray for to get saved and to join them in their efforts. And they would track God's answers to those prayers. One by one, they began to see young men saved and then agreed to work with them to bring others to Christ. Their open-air efforts grew by leaps and bounds, and soon they formed the Belfast Youth Evangelistic Campaign, working with the churches in the city to preach the gospel and win souls to Christ. Their ministry grew so rapidly that they were soon conducting 15 evangelistic campaigns simultaneously throughout the region. Their next step was to pray for a band of 2,400 teenage boys and young adults to work to bring revival to all of Ireland. Churches, youth groups, prayer groups, and all kinds of Christian ministries joined together to hold gospel preaching campaigns in many different cities, towns, and villages throughout the country. All of these great results had taken place within just a year and a half after James and his friends started their street meetings in Belfast. Then, in August of 1933, a preacher approached James on behalf of a committee of Christian businessmen, offering to pay his salary if he would quit his job and travel the world, doing in country after country what he had done in Ireland. James decided to accept their offer, but after he had informed his employer that he was resigning to serve the Lord, James was notified that the men who had presented this ministry opportunity to him had been forced to rescind their invitation. James was certain he could get his job back, but the offer to bring revival to other countries had lit a fire in James's heart that wouldn't be quenched. He wrestled in prayer and fasting for several days, until finally he decided to step out in faith and go to work for the Lord without any money. When James went to inform his widowed mother of his plans, he promised her that he would continue to send her the same weekly support that he had given her for years. His mom looked worried. "I know you'll try, son, but where will it come from?" James said, "Mother, I don't know. But it says in the Bible, 'My God shall supply all your need.' And either that's true or else it's not. If it's true, we'll be all right. If it's not true, the sooner we find out, the better." J. Edwin Orr then got on his bicycle, and with 65 cents in his pocket and no specific plan, he rode off to do the Lord's work. He said, "I felt that I had been called to be a witness for God to stir up interest in a spiritual awakening all over the world." All of his friends, except for one, thought he was crazy, and that one said that he wasn't sure. James did have a goal, to preach in all of Great Britain within a year. His first destination was London, 200 miles away. He wasn't too far down the road when he started to wonder if he wasn't crazy. But then he begins to give the fascinating details of how, day after day, In village after village, God opened doors for him to preach without him having to ask. God provided meals and shelter, and he always provided him with the money to send home to his mother, until at last he had preached throughout Great Britain. In 1937, he married, and he and his wife had 4 children. They moved to America, and James was ordained a Baptist preacher in New Jersey in 1940. The stories of his life and ministry on 6 continents are fascinating, which you can read about in the many different books that he authored. J. Edwin Orr died in North Carolina on April 22, 1987. Christian, God can still use his servants to do the impossible. Stay the course.